The following is a conversation with Bakz Awan, developer, entrepreneur, and creator, and a strong voice in the OpenAI API community. He has a YouTube channel and a podcast where he talks about GPT-3, DALL-E, and multimodal AI future. If you're interested in GPT-3, make sure to subscribe and check out our GPT-3 manual book for O'Reilly. This is Sandra and Shubham, and we hope you enjoy this interview. Bakz, we are big fans of your content creation, and we follow your YouTube channel for years now. I think it's like one of the most successful and most interesting channels out there when it comes to the GPT-3 community. So we wanted to start kind of asking a little bit about yourself and like what you're trying to do with the channel. How did it happen that you started to talk about GPT-3, stuff like that?
Yeah. So I guess, starting the YouTube channel is just a subset of getting into GPT-3 itself, right? So I guess what happened was I was sort of on the lookout for, pretty big AI breakthroughs, NLP breakthroughs. I was coming from sort of the search engine space, and I came across GPT-3 and it was just mind blowing, right? I'm sure you all feel the same way. This is technology that I felt was maybe 5-10 years away, and it was here today. And actually, not even today, it was here last year, 2020, right? And so to get a taste of the future, I think is that first kernel of inspiration, right? You get a little taste of the future, you get a little piece of cheese, right? And that serves as the inspiration that perhaps you can be a part of something much bigger than you, right? You can be part of something and bringing this to the world. And so that's how I fell into GPT-3. And then I sort of I just made a video showing GPT-3 use cases, just putting it out there that this technology exists. This is things that it can do. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that. And essentially since then, I've published sort of my own research kind of videos with GPT-3 use cases I've discovered. I've created resources for people, like teaching them. And also I run the podcast as well. So I have a newsletter, I have a podcast, and I have the YouTube channel as well. And I'm always on Twitter as well, tweeting wildly. So it's been a fun experience for me too. And I realize I love talking about this stuff. I could probably go on for days. So, yep.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we know Bakz, you have been talking a lot about GPT-3 and you have already put out a lot of different views, different perspectives out there in the form of your YouTube videos. But if you have to summarize, what are your views on models like GPT-3, Codex, and OpenAI API in general? Do you think is it something that will be a stepping stone for AGI?
Yeah, so that's a really tricky question to answer. I maybe it's something best left to the experts who have PhDs in this kind of stuff. It is weird though. Like if this is not a stepping stone to AGI, then what is, right? You look at some of the capabilities that it's capable of doing, things it was not even trained to do, how you can interact with it, how it's not bothered by typos or all these things. It's interesting. At the same time, OpenAI has also talked about some of the limitations of GPT-3. So one of those is reasoning. Apparently, there's something with reasoning and perhaps logic where as it scales, that does not improve. However, all these other skills like superglue, performance, and all those question and answering, all these things, it appears to scale. So I mean, maybe it's got some of AGI, maybe not all. Maybe this is part of a larger picture. Maybe there's more components, maybe there's more research needed. But even with the existing technology today, there is a multitude of commercial applications. And so I think it will be commercialized at a far wider scale than previous AI technologies. So stepping stone AGI, maybe it's best I don't comment, but definitely a significant moment in machine learning and AI tech history. Yeah. And the GPT-3 paper, I think they won an award for it as well from one of the most respected AI research papers, right? So that's no small thing. And history will decide, but that's just how I feel.
So You mentioned that you've been looking prior to talking about GPT-3, DALL-E, multimodals. You've been doing you've been kind of screening what was going on in terms of AI breakthroughs in terms of NLP. Like what led you to that place in the first place? Like what was that?
Yeah, so the DALL-E was announced, believe it or not, this year in January. That was 12 months ago. And I mean, you just see that, and that's another example of, you know, the results that they showed in that paper, particularly for the avocado chair. These are things I thought were years away, right? And I mean, to be honest, like it's less of a jump to see going from GPT-3, which is text, to basically GPT-3 for images. Like I guess it's less of a jump, but when you actually see those results and you like are like, wow, like I can just type in text and it generates like a reasonable image. It's just really compelling. And so essentially the genesis of this series was using GPT-3 in summer 2020 and speculating what it could be like for different kinds of media. So for images and video and audio, and then seeing DALL-E a few months later and realizing, wow, this stuff is really coming and it's a big deal. And so I made this series with, it's got everything in there. It's got predictions for the next, 2 to 10 years. It's got societal implications, the ethics. It's got, practical lessons for creatives, like what are some important ideas? How should you think about it? How should you think about your career as a creative in the future? It's jam packed essentially I tried to make it like almost like a sampling of the future. So if I was looking back 10 years from now, or if I was there 10 years later, like what are the important ideas of that era? And so anyways, you sort of, it's sometimes like art inspires research and research inspires art, like I don't know who inspired OpenAI, but I'm inspired by OpenAI. And then I also know, making my videos in the series, where I even made like a concept product, right? Like I made a Windows program to show what multimodal tools of the future could be like. Like I'm hoping somebody else will see my YouTube, which I would classify more as art, and maybe make that a reality. So it's, everybody's feeding off of each other and contributing and pushing the boundaries forward. So that's how I got into it.
Max, in all your videos, we see you get overwhelming response, even though it's a technical video on GPT-3, and to be precise, on a large language model of natural language processing field. But still, the audience generally is very, very diversified. People from all backgrounds are viewing that. Why do you think there is such a high interest in topics like GPT-3, called Codex, DALL-E, and multimodal? Especially now, because before it used to be conventionally, it used to be things for machine learning engineers or people in the AI domain or people in the scientific domain. But now people from art backgrounds and people from other different backgrounds are also getting attracted and getting involved in the field. Where do you think it is going, and what is the kind of future we can think of with all these things happening in parallel?
Yeah. So in one of my podcast videos on Codex, like I think it was called like, is Codex fizzling out or something like that. I did talk about just this basic idea of market size, right? Like who's the target audience? How big is that market? Now, I argued in that video that Codex is a much smaller market, right? Like you are talking about essentially programmers, maybe programmers who are into AI and who are open to having some kind of completions done for them on like through AI, right? GPT-3, however, because of its use cases, I think it's important to think of it more as a use case technology rather than an NLP or an AI technology, right? People have use cases in mind, and GPT-3 can fulfill those use cases, right? So it's a very diverse set of people that can benefit from GPT-3. And so that's also why the audience is so big, right? Like journalists are interested in it, right? Because they can't believe it can write, realistic articles you'd find in the New York Times or the CBC or the BBC or something like that. Copywriters are interested in the marketing angle, right? People who were coders also were messing around with GPT-3 to see if it can write code. So GPT-3 even takes some of Codex's market, right? And there's other things too. Some people are looking for life advice. Some people are playing games with GPT-3, right? So to be honest, it is a universal tool. And I also think GPT-3 is just so usable, right? Like a 5-year-old can use GPT-3 and have fun and make meaningful things with it. It's definitely got the terms of usage say you have to be 18 plus. So like we have to be careful, but I'm making in a theoretical argument. I'm basically saying I have interacted and actually really promoted people who are over 65 using GPT-3, which is like crazy, right? It's a product that has such a spectrum, right? It's not just like it diverse in all these different ways, background, age, gender, whatever, right? So it has mass appeal. And I looked up the Google Trends data on one of my podcasts as well, and GPT-3 is also very popular if you compare it to any other OpenAI product. And so it's universal. It's a universal tool, kind of like a hammer or something. So that's why it gets so much interest.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
So while GPT-3 is universal and OpenAI is kind of consciously designing the interface around it in order to make it more and more accessible and like democratize the access to it. Now the access is completely free to anybody, which is an amazing, crazy and amazing step for them. So people with all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of like levels of information are now being able to poke around and try it on themselves. So I am asking this question now in order to clear the air a little bit. Like there is quite some misconceptions about GPT-3 that are out there in the discussion about it. What do you think is like, what would be the biggest ones, and like how do you approach them?
Yeah, so I'm sure this is something you guys have noticed too. Like when you speak to people who have never heard of GPT-3 or kind of know about it or are interested, the same sets of questions come up every time, right? So the first question used to be, how do I get access? And that used to be like a whole 20-minute spiel. And I used to just schedule phone calls and tell people, let me hop on a call and tell you how to do this, because it'd be a whole like 30-minute process. You got to talk to this guy. You got to do this in your application. You got to do that. So that's out of the way, thank God, right? So then I guess the questions are like, can I give it every book ever? Right? Like, so people, it's important they understand that GPT-3 is text-based only. And that means not only can you only give it text, you can't even give it technically, spreadsheets of data, only text, right? But at the same time, GPT-3 has only seen text. And so that's a really important idea, because that means you shouldn't expect that it knows like about the physical world, even though it obviously does in all these different ways. Like, don't expect that don't be hard on it because it hasn't seen anything beyond text. Like it can describe the Mona Lisa, it can tell you the significance, the importance, the history about it probably, but it's never seen it because it's only trained on text as well, right? So that's the first piece, is it's text only, in and out. Then people are like, oh, can I get it to write, 1,000 books for me, right? In which case the answer is yes and no. The truth is it's a 2048 character limit, and that includes both the input and the output, both the prompt and the completion. So that's another misconception. Then the third misconception I hear a lot is people are like, okay, so basically on one hand, a lot of the questions you get are a reflection of people's lives and where they're at, right? So the non-technical people will be like, do I need a degree to use this? Do I need to know how to code to use it? Which I think is a really fair question. To which case my answer is absolutely not. You can use the OpenAI playground. You can do everything from there. You don't need to write a single line of code. You can get results instantly. Anybody, any ability, any age. Like that's where I stand. I think maybe we're in agreement on that. On the other hand of the spectrum, you have people who are like honestly way too educated, right? Like multiple PhDs. And so they assume that it's a lot more complicated. So they'll be like, oh, so how do you train it, right? Like how many epochs and stuff does it take? And you're like, oh, no, you don't need to train it, right? Like you can you can just give it examples in the prompt, right? And 2 or 3 examples is enough. And for them, even when you say that, that's crazy because a lot of them can't even believe that's possible today, right? Like true few shot learning. And then I guess the final piece is, once you've gone through all those hurdles, a misconception is then, okay, how, like essentially people want to know how to commercialize, and commercialization is really a question of reliability. And so when it comes to reliability, the misconception is people don't realize GPT-3 is non-deterministic. So what that means is every time you hit generate, for your prompt, it's going to give you a different answer each time. That's by design, right? Every once in a while, I get caught in a loop. It'll repeat itself, or if you really have a specific prompt, it will always say the same thing. But by design, it's meant to say a different thing each time. And so it's important to understand that while you're using it, and then sort of to sort of answer the misconception, you want to point them a little bit towards fine tuning. And fine tuning is a separate process. Unfortunately, I don't think it's quite ready for the everyday person. I mean, it's doable, but it's a little bit tricky depending upon your use case and what you're trying to do. So anyways, altogether, those are the most common questions I get. And then, the biggest one is, what can I do with it, right? And so I don't know how many more use case videos I can make. I love making them, but like I'm already on I think I'm on the 4th or 5th one, right? And the truth is that it can do a lot of things, and we don't quite know all the things it can do, right? That's nobody knows. I don't know. You don't know. OpenAI doesn't know. Nobody knows all the things it can do. That's part of the fun of the OpenAI beta and the program, is it's up to you to find a use case, right? And the example I always give for use case inspiration, Mark Ryan, he has a cool YouTube channel. He put out a video about, he basically discovered, and I told you this last time, Sandra, that GPT-3 can give directions on the New York subway system to like a 60% accuracy, right? Obviously, it's never been in a subway. It's never seen the map of the subway, but somehow it can do that, right? So anyways, like the use cases, I think that's why it's so important for diverse people from different backgrounds, different skill levels to come in, because I think they'll find the vast majority of use cases at this point. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So moving on to our next question. In the last 1 year, we have seen a lot of companies, startups formed on top of GPT-3, and that is completely based on GPT-3 as a core. So we think that GPT-3 has also led to the emergence of a creator economy, where everyone suddenly feels more empowered to take their ideas to execution. What are your views on this, and what do you think is this going forward? Where is this going forward?
Yeah, the creator economy is an interesting idea. I think in your case, you're talking about it from an economic perspective, right? This idea that you can be an individual and make things and have a direct relationship with your audience, and they'll pay you directly, and there's no middleman or something like that. So that part is a trend. It is accelerating. I don't know to what extent AI will impact that, but I mean, I think it would supercharge it, right? And the reason that I say that is, again, like you can use GPT-3 to write books, right? And so I think if in the past, if you weren't a good writer, but you had good ideas, you had good thoughts, you had an interesting story, you've been through a lot in your life, with GPT-3, suddenly now you may have an AI tool that can help you put words on a page. This is something I personally know about because I'm a decent writer, but I have friends who are brilliant thinkers, but they just, whenever it's time to put it in words, they just can't do it, right? And sometimes a lot of that is like mental kinds of challenges as well, right? Like it's not just about sitting down and doing it. I think there's just a lot of people who just can't do that, right? For whatever reason, whether it's focus or attention span or whatever, right? And so, but they're brilliant. And so, I'm just excited for these kinds of new opportunities, and Codex as well, and GitHub Copilot is another opportunity. One thing I tweeted 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was something along the lines of, I'm excited to work on more side projects now because I know I'll have the help of GitHub Copilot. It's almost like I have a co-founder now. It is helpful. So that is one way in which it's accelerating the creator economy, is just you have some completions. Even if GPT-3 or Codex is filling in a few words for you going forward, that is accelerating, and that is accelerating my experience, and that will accelerate so many other people's experiences as well, right? Like I've already said, Codex and Copilot is writing 3 to 5% of my code, maybe 3 to 10, 2 to 10, something like that. So it has already made me 2 to 10% more accelerated, right? And all of this stuff is on an exponential scale. So what will GPT-3 be like next year? What will Codex be like next year? I may be 30% more accelerated next year, right? So the question of creator economy, like I'm biased, but I strongly think yes, it will accelerate it. The question is of the dynamics, though, right? Once things are accelerated, how does that affect competition? So I try to answer some of those questions in my series, GPTX, DALL-E, and our multimodal future. My argument to that, and I apologize, I'm going a little bit on a tangent here, but my argument to that is basically that at first it will get very competitive because everyone will be accelerated and have like these superpowers. And I think then people will compete actually on taste. I think they'll compete on, so if, for example, like if everybody is using GPT-3 to write essays, I think it will boil down to who used GPT-3 to write the best essay, like who actually won an award for their essay. What essay comes from the most significant personal story that is a once in a lifetime story? You are destined to write this story. So I think it will raise the bar as well. So it will have meaningful economics, but also we'll be reading better stuff than ever before. We'll be watching better movies than ever before. We'll be listening to music that's better than before, like once in a lifetime kinds of experiences. So I'm excited for that as well as a consumer of all of these different kinds of media.
That's an amazing take on it. So actually following up on that, because accelerating our innate creative capabilities is one thing, but I am also wondering about sort of looking at it from the other side, where you have lots of people that don't necessarily have the knowledge of coding, myself included, and that have lots of creativity and that would perhaps be able to create apps with the use of models like GPT-3, all sorts of projects with the use of these models. And we see that the access to it is getting easier and easier for them. Do you feel like we are moving in the direction where in order to interact with AI, you will no longer need to have any sort of background? I mean, interact in a creative sort of, on your own terms sort of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you mean specifically Codex and apps, or do you mean creativity in general?
I mean models like GPT-3 or Codex that are getting less and less sort of code heavy, like the barrier, the barrier to use them is getting easier, lower. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah, I definitely agree on that. GPT-3 is very usable for how sophisticated and complex and all the things it can do. It is insanely usable. It's almost like, it's not just a superpower. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it's like, if you had told me to get all the things that GPT-3 can do, you have to go in a room and the computer is going to be the size of the room and it runs on a specialized version of Linux that I have to type all these commands and I have to have it I have to do training in order to use. That's what I would expect from GPT-3's current abilities today, right? And the fact that it's not only available today, it's usable. You just need a browser. If you've filled out a sign-up form online to register for any website, you can use the OpenAI playground. Like, that's how straightforward it is. So one of the things, and this is a good question in the way it's like, I think GPT-3 is underhyped. I think all these things are underhyped for how usable and friendly and fun and powerful they really are. It's almost shocking, and it's been a year and I'm still just as shocked, right? Likewise with, we haven't seen DALL-E yet, but obviously the idea that you can just type in text and generate an image and play around with that, that is something, to be honest, humanity has never seen before, right? Like that is a new human capability, very usable, right? Compare that to Photoshop and all the different steps and tutorials and courses you need to take, right? It's incredible. As for Codex, the current state of Codex and Copilot, I would actually say is actually further away. Part of the reason is Codex can't open a browser. It can't, use a command line. It's strictly limited to writing code. So I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend Codex to absolute beginners. Also, the Codex on the playground is not as UI friendly. There's something about it where it's kind of a hassle right now. Codex is brand new; it's still a work in process. So my take specifically for coding and apps is, is it's basically you can use it as sort of an assistant. That's how I would treat it, especially if you're new. I would focus more on GPT-3 right now if I was new to coding, and I would try to build an app based on a GPT-3 use case. That's what I would do today. My answer may change next year.
Yep, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So moving forward, Max, what are the most advanced use cases of GPT-3 you have seen so far that seemed impossible or kind of way too complex before GPT-3?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned this to Sandra before, like my video on generating press releases. This is a known use case. I'm not sure if I was the first one to discover it in summer 2020. It doesn't matter. But the idea that you can just give a headline and it writes a press release as good as something you'd see in the news that would be distributed publicly is insane. And I think one of the reasons it's so insane is a lot of the press releases are pretty coherent. They make sense based on the business and all of these different factors that somebody who works in PR would think about. And also, the main thing with generating press releases that I'm always shocked by is just the speed. Like you literally pushed a button and you're watching it like just go across and generate an entire press release. And seeing that, I realized like this is just impossible for a human to do at this speed and this coherency in a single draft, right? Like it's just not possible that a human could do this. And so like that sort of, I guess, debunked the non-existent conspiracy theory that GPT-3 is just one guy who types really fast behind the scenes and it's not an AI, right? Because there's just no way a single human, or even like if you had an army of people, it could not do that, right? Single take, one draft, this coherent, this creative. It's when you generate press releases, you also get a taste of the charm of GPT-3. It's actually quite charming, right? I think that's part of the reason it does so well. It has such a broad audience. It's likable, right? And this is actually one of the smaller problems I have with Codex, right? Like it's not as likable. It's not as fun. It doesn't have a personality, right? It's doing a completely different line of work. But anyways, like I guess I'm just saying is if you want a good taste of GPT-3, definitely have it generate a press release. And I've already mentioned the video with Mark Ryan where it can give directions to the subway system. That was just a great thing to try out. And it's an example of the amount of interesting use cases and stuff that are out there that we simply don't know about. There's probably so many more like that. So those are my examples. And if you want more advanced use cases, you're talking about prompt chaining, and you want like a whole ecosystem of prompts. You might have like a smaller language model that interacts with GPT-3. It can get super complicated. So I'll leave it to you guys to give some good examples of that stuff in chapters 24 to 28, where it's all the advanced stuff. You made it through the whole book, right? And like you are ready for the PhD level use case kind of stuff. So I'll leave it to you guys for that.
Yes, we will take it.
You guys take it up.
Yes, we'll take it there. So yeah, actually that was an interesting point. I wasn't thinking before about models in terms of personality, but when you compare like this, it feels like GPT-3 is this like bubbly extrovert, and Codex is like introvert with a little bit of Asperger's, maybe some
Yeah.
that type of thing. Yeah, it's like super inspiring actually to think about it
Yep.
along those lines. So I want to ask you, and I guess the honest answer will be to go and have a look at your awesome series that you've created about this subject. But nonetheless, if you would care to give us a little bit of flavor of that, in what ways do you think GPT-3 will shape careers, tasks, full professions, maybe in the future of people like developers, designers, content creators, ...
Yeah. So in my last podcast, I sort of mentioned I think 2022, because we're starting to think about next year already. I definitely think we'll start seeing GPT-3 hit up the school system. Now, the official OpenAI policy is 18 plus, so I guess I'm talking university, but I can see some threshold, some tipping point of students using it, which is kind of it's something nobody talks about in the community that I'm sort of really uh, putting my finger on and sort of throwing the dart at there. And the reason is simply that you're writing essays, you have to write assignments. I went to business school, having to do a SWOT analysis, right? There are a million and one things that GPT-3 could help with while you're in school. I also think there is something about school nowadays is so much pressure. These students are anxious. There's all these different reasons, and I think part of the reason is simply you get writer's block, right? And so the idea that you can have like an aid that can help you pull you out of writer's block and just give you suggestions on here's where you can go with your essay. Here's how I'd come up. Here's a thesis idea for you. Here's all these things. You feel a lot less alone, right? And you have support and it's always available. You can push a button and get feedback, right? Like that is incredibly handy and powerful, and I think actually good for students. And so I think in the near term, 1 year. And so what's also crazy is I was also sort of doing some research and having these kinds of conversations. And the big thing I found is high schoolers were not down for the previous OpenAI process where they have to fill out a wait list. And I completely get it. If I was 16 or 15, I would not do the wait list either. Right. However, now that it's completely open to the public, I think they will just sign up and use it. And what's also interesting, I did research and I found out these high schoolers are already using AI-based writing tools. There's like a different tool set or something called AI Writer, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't run on GPT-3. So it's going to be a million one times better. And so it'll just go viral on campuses. That's actually one of my predictions for next year. And I want to add, this is probably beyond the discussion. What does this mean for schooling and academia and all these other things? I think I said in my last podcast that whole education system needs to be gutted, right? I think that's what I said. And it's a pretty harsh take, but maybe it is time to ask fundamental questions, right? Why do we, if you can write the format of an essay, do you deserve 100%, right? What makes a great essay, right? Are some students still brilliant, even if they don't know the format, but they can use an AI to help write the format, right? I think it's worth asking these things. Do grades matter, right? My personal argument has always been why is math always so important? Why do you need a good math and English mark to get into the best programs, right? Like I've even when I was in high school, if you got 100% in computer science, but you didn't do well in math, you would not go into a university. You would not get into a university based on your math mark alone. It didn't matter what you actually got in computer science. So if you got 100% in accounting, but you didn't do well in math, you wouldn't get into the university accounting program. Why is that? Right? If someone has an aptitude for something like computer science or accounting, who cares about their math and English mark? Right? I'm excited for these discussions to happen. I don't quite know if the systems, at least out in the West, are capable of answering fundamental questions and changing, but I think that's the next big wave that's coming. And nobody's talking about it, but I can feel it. I got goosebumps even thinking about it. As for everybody else, we're already seeing writers, directly with GPT-3 benefiting from it. When the multimodal stuff kicks in, we'll see other mediums, right? Like music, video, graphic designers, product designers, that whole category of people. They will be accelerated, and they will benefit symbiotically from it. And essentially, I even think too, they will push all their mediums forward in ways we simply cannot conceptualize today. We will have new kinds of movies altogether, new kinds of genres altogether. We will have interactive experiences. We'll have integrated experiences. So even the movie poster may be the most brilliant movie poster, and it integrates perfectly with the actual movie and the trailer and everything else. So altogether, the big wave next year, students, everything else is also coming. And all these things raise fundamental questions that I think are important.
It's great. In this question, you've touched some really deep philosophical questions, and as we are nearing the end, we generally end up asking end with a philosophical question. So here is one more for you. Feel free to answer. What do you think will be the long-term impact of GPT-3, and where do you think it is steering the technical landscape in general?
How is it changing it today?
How is it changing it today, and what will be the long-term impact in the future?
Yeah.
Based on your wild imagination that you can think of.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think GPT-3 in its form is a utility. Like it's really a utility. It's sort of, I have this Substack piece on it's like how to build a GPT-3 startup monopoly, right? That's that newsletter. Like I think pretty much everyone has read that article at this point in the community. But I said in it that it's kind of like you ever watch The Lion King, and there's like a central body of water, and all the animals drink from it and live near it. Like I think that's kind of what GPT-3 is. Like it's the well that we all depend on, and like our lives will kind of revolve around. And in the way you get electricity and you don't question it, in a way you use AWS and cloud services and you don't question it, in the way that all these things exist, I think that's really what GPT-3 is. And the people who made the electricity grid, they would have thought that you'd be using it for lighting. And nowadays people are using it to mine Bitcoin or whatever's the cool coin right now, right? So it's, again, I keep saying the same thing. We simply cannot conceptualize. We can, I can give you the near term with students. I think that's something under that people are not realizing. But what I'm saying is, even I cannot conceptualize beyond that it's a utility, beyond students will be using it, where it will go, right? And personally, the big thing is scaling laws, right? So the papers say that as you increase the parameter count and all these other factors, it gets even smarter. So what will GPT-4 be like? I'm not sure. I'm sure at some point it will be like talking to an alien, right? And in a way, GPT-3 is already like that. And so what will GPT-4, what will GPT-5 be like? What will it be capable of doing? What does this mean for the economy, the politics, the internet, humanity, our identity? I have a separate series called GPT-3 and Identity, right? So all I'm just saying is this stuff is on an exponential curve. So GPT-3 alone is a society-changing thing. Every order of magnitude that it improves will raise the bar even further. I guess also my final piece is I wanted to just mention as we're closing, have you guys seen the movie Interstellar or no? Yeah. So, I'm going to spoil it, so heads up. But like in the end, Matthew McConaughey, he ends up in the future, right? And then he realizes he's got to go back to find the girl, Anne Hathaway, whatever her character was. Remember, because she's still out there. And then he grabs TARS, which is like the handy robot who was with him the whole journey right to the end. It's like, and at that point, that AI is primitive, right? So, I guess I just wanted to say that I've had more GPT-3 is very sentimental to me at this point. So for me, I'm sure 10 years from now, everyone will be using the latest and greatest, and it's going to be capable of doing all these things. I think 10 years from now, I'm still going to be like Matthew McConaughey and take GPT-3. I'll take the older stuff, the primitive stuff with me on my spaceship or whatever, because it's just sentimental to me, and I don't care at this point. It's crazy. I don't care about AI progress in a way, right? Because this is alone so much for me. It means a lot to me, and I will always hold it near and dear to my heart. So that's just like, on one hand, I'm excited about the future. On the other hand, like the GPT-3 itself is really compelling. It means a lot to me. So
that's a really interesting perspective, and even the outlook. I really appreciate. I actually love it.
There's your sunset moment. Like, I'm literally in a spaceship and the sun is setting,
well, actually,
and I have the playground open, and I'm asking it like to write this copy for me.
Like, I don't want to troll this beautiful vision, Bakz, but we also heard some gossip that the GPT-4 might be actually multimodal. So I think that in your case, you would be like having like suitcase with all these different types of models with you, and just wait until the next one.
And I that's something we didn't get to talk about, but even just the diversity of models that are available, you know, Cohere or all these other things, right? That's another important thing for access and everything else. But yeah, you are absolutely right. Maybe there will be more. I don't know. Maybe you always have your first love, so it's a little bit.
True that.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share some gossip. You have absolutely no idea what actual, outcome in the future. Okay, so we reached the end of the interview. It's been so fun having you, talking to you, and learning from you as well. You have a really compelling way of and very unique perspective on many things around GPT-3. So yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you so much.